Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Carroll Connection. I am your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. I did want to take a chance to shout out my last episode, episode 128 with Josh Troiano. He is a high school football player. He's in his senior year. He's been on the podcast twice, and one of my favorite guests, and like the fact that I've had him on twice should say enough because I've had only a select few people return for the podcast so far, which is great. Talked about his senior year, talked about the Thanksgiving game. He talked about being recruited. He's going to play D1 football at Stonehill. We talked all about that process and what he's excited for. So you can check that out at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch your podcast, you could go on YouTube to search The Carroll Connection or search Jared M. Carroll. It should pop up right for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as guest, please reach out to me on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at The Carroll Connection. And we'll set it up. I try to do a few weeks in advance to kind of like make sure things are organized, but just do that and reach out and we'll set some stuff up. So that brings me to today's episode 129 with David Pedro.
David Pedro, thank you very much.
Pedro, sorry.
It's all right, don't worry about it, man. Everybody makes a mistake.
It's all good. Okay. So tell everyone kind of who you are and what you're doing currently.
My name is David Pedro. I just graduated from Bristol Community College with my General Studies Associate's degree. I plan on pursuing a career in real estate. I plan on starting my real estate school next month. And in my free time, I like to play music in my band, Sue's Garage.
Awesome, and shout out Zach. He's been on the podcast. So I'm trying to get the band one by one, guys, and I'm trying to separate it so it's digestible for everyone on the listening side. But when I like to start off my podcast, I told you a little bit about family dynamic and how I like to start that off. But for any new listener, I like to tell them why I do it, just so they understand. It's partially because we're talking about your life here. So I want to establish the kind of the foundation basically and build upon that.
Right.
So for the people listening, that's why I do that. And for the return listeners, sorry you have to go through that spiel every single time, but I always like to cater to the new audience because you're a new guest as well. So whatever you're comfortable with sharing, I'll let you kind of like take the lead with family dynamic.
Yeah, sure. So I was born to my mother and my father, obviously. I lived in East Providence for the first couple years of my life before moving to Seekonk. And I have one full biological sister. And then when I was around 5 or 6 years old, my parents ended up splitting up. My mom stayed in Seekonk for a while. My dad lived in Pawtucket. So I grew up kind of in Seekonk, kind of in Pawtucket for probably 5 to 10. Around that time, my father moved back to Seekonk and my mother moved to Cranston, where I went to school for 4th grade through 8th grade. She moved in with my stepfather, who's a great guy. And then my father ended up remarrying to my stepmother. From my stepfather, my mother had 2 more children. My twin sisters, who just turned 9 years old, and my father, my stepmother, now my ex-stepmother, because they ended up getting divorced as well, actually. She had 2 daughters with one man and 2 sons with another man. Those 2 sons are now 23 years old. They're also twins, and my father actually ended up adopting them, so they became my half-brothers legally instead of my stepbrothers. And after my father and my stepmother got divorced, they remained my brothers, and I still refer to my 2 stepsisters as my sisters, even though legally they're not related to me anymore, but we have a close bond, so, I say them every now and again, around town and whatever. We always have a good conversation. And nowadays, I'm living with my mother at home in Seekonk, and with my stepfather and my 3 sisters, actually, but she's away at UMass Amherst most of the time. Also around town, I have my mom's brother, my uncle's family, who I am incredibly close to, and my mother's parents, who I am extremely close to. My grandfather is my best friend in my whole life. My grandmother is somebody who I can look up to for anything I'd ever need. She's one of the kindest, most warm-hearted people you'd ever meet in your whole life. And I love them very dearly, and I feel very blessed to be able to have them as such an instrumental part of my life, even going into my 20s.
Yeah, so did going through like divorce and stuff as a young child, like how did that affect you growing up? Did you feel anything that was like harder, maybe making friends or whatever it could be possibly? I don't know, but like I'm wondering, was it difficult, and did you not even realize at that age, and maybe did it kind of like rear its head a little bit when you got older?
Sure, it was definitely a difficult thing at the time, but I don't think it was, like emotionally difficult at the time. It was
Mhm.
more just upsetting because, I grew up in Seekonk. I have all these friends in Seekonk, and all of a sudden I need to move to Cranston, uproot my whole life, make all these new friends, and then going into eighth grade, move back to Seekonk and restart that whole process once again. So that was really, the only hard part for me at the time, going through those difficult circumstances. Um, but it also kind of instilled within me that love is a choice, and that you feel love for somebody, you make that choice every day to remain with them, and there's no such thing as like a true love, or like a Hollywood fairy tale love story where something's kismet and it's happily ever after. Relationships are going to be difficult. Relationships are going to have trials and tribulations that you as a person in a relationship need to endure, and have a level head through in order to come out on the other side with the person that you love so much. And yeah, so really it's taught me a lot of life lessons just by watching the processes of divorce have to take place, and the understanding the relationship dynamic between my biological mother and father, as well as my mother and my stepfather, and my father and my ex stepmother. So
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the point of love is a choice, because that is like, I totally agree with that. And especially nowadays where um there's so many different options between social media and dating apps and stuff like that. It's like a different generation with dating, and the different mindset is like completely thrown out the window. The way that our parents grew up and what was expected of them is completely different than what's expected of us going into this generation.
right,
And a lot of people don't have those values, and a lot of times they do come from broken homes, so they don't really know what to emulate in their
right,
relationships, because what you see growing up and what you're around truly does affect you as a person. And if you don't know how to like recognize those things and those behaviors, and how to adjust and learn to cope and not to lash out, or like use the trauma as like an excuse
right,
to hurt other people,
sure.
then it could become like a negative thing. But you have to be able to address that stuff, and not a lot of people are like self-aware enough to acknowledge that. So it's nice to hear that you've been able to kind of separate that and look at that from your home situation,
Yeah,
and at least in terms of that relationship.
you got to find the lessons in everything in life, and that's no different. Watching something difficult like that transpire, especially at a young age, sure, it'll have an effect on who you are subconsciously, and it'll resonate within you for every relationship you ever have. It'll be a piece of you that you witness something like that during developmental years. But as a maturing person, being able to reflect on those past experiences, you need to find the lessons in order to grow from them. In order to not just become a victim of your own circumstances, you need to realize, okay, this is what happened in these circumstances that I witnessed growing up, and as traumatic as they might have been, or might not have been, you take what's learned and you apply it to your own life and your own relationships. Um, I've been with my girlfriend for just over 5.5 years now. So we started dating even when, my father and my stepmother, that was still a very difficult situation for me to go through. And she's somebody, she's my better half. She keeps my head on my shoulders, and she's just somebody that for over a quarter of my life now I've been able to turn to when times are tough, and she always has my back through anything. So I'm just lucky enough to be able to find a circumstance in which I feel comfortable making the decision to stay with her every single day, no matter what that means. And because I have such a deep understanding of the ins and outs of relationships, even in adulthood, from those experiences with both sets of my parents, it's helped me a lot in my own relationships. Not just this one. Obviously, this one is by far the most successful relationship I've ever been in. But with every relationship I've ever been in, I try to apply those. Sure, it's not always easy, but having an understanding of adult relationships, and what can go wrong when, and what the person across the table from you means to you, is critical in evolving as a couple.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, congrats to you guys for having this long of a relationship these
Thank you.
days. Like, that's definitely a difficult thing to do, and like it goes back to the choice aspect. Like, you guys choose to choose each other
Right.
and choose to be there, because like loving someone's not easy. Like
Right.
it's really difficult, and it's hard to love someone when they go through all the bad stuff, when they're having a bad day, when they're being mean to you. It's hard to love someone when
Right.
they're being mean to you.
Yeah.
So like you have to learn, as especially as you mature in age, and like you have to go through things, and that's something that people will be afraid to get into relationships because they don't want bad experiences.
Yep.
But like realistically, you kind of need to experience some stuff that is gonna like force you to change and grow a little bit. And not
Right.
enough people will go through those things.
You need to learn how to disagree with them. You need to, how to facilitate arguments and how to facilitate disagreements, and come out on the other side of those, stronger than you were before. Because sure, there's going to be, really difficult ones and really tough circumstances to have to go through, but you need to always remember that you're on the same team as that other person. They're not the enemy, and it's you and the person against the situation. And it's just you have to work through that situation, come out on the other side better than you were before, and learn from it. And like you said, it's not always an easy thing. We both went to college. A lot of relationships don't survive college, and we just we made the decision that college lifestyle, going out partying all the time, potentially hooking up with all these different people, it's not even close to worth throwing away what we've built over the course of so many years at this point. So it's important to us to work towards the life that we have together up until this point.
Yeah, I think one thing too that people don't do is ask themselves, what do you want?
Right.
Like, what do you want in a relationship? Where do you see yourself in 5-10 years? And like, yeah, everyone doesn't like that question, where you are in 5-10 years, but it's important to like check in with yourself and ask yourself, do I just want to be hooking up and going out drinking? Do I want to be in a relationship? Do I want a family and kids? Like, these are important questions to ask yourself when you're going to involve yourself with someone else, because you're potentially could make or break their own life. You don't want to ruin someone else's life because your own indecisions and like lack of self-awareness to acknowledge that you might not want what they want. And not enough people will do those things. And I think some of it stems from lack of therapy. Some of it stems from the way people are raised.
Sure.
And some of it just stems from straight narcissism. Like some
Sure.
people just don't want to acknowledge things, and that's totally fine. I mean, live in your own bubble, but I think it's important to address those things. I do want to take the next step with the podcast and ask you kind of sports and hobbies growing up. Like, what did you get into? How did you make friends? Like, what kind of things did you enjoy doing? And I'll kind of bounce off with you.
Sure. So, sports wise, I started out playing t-ball and basketball when I was, a very young kid. Neither of those stuck with me very much. I played on like rec teams, and then I quit them all. And then I moved to Cranston. And in the 4th grade is when I started playing football. And that's when I realized, this is the sport for me. This is, where I belong. I loved being on the field with my teammates. I loved the sport itself. I loved the aggression. The whole atmosphere was just what I was drawn to year after year. And then I came back. I played every year that I lived in Cranston. And then when I moved back to Seekonk, they didn't have a team for my 8th grade year. So I actually ended up having to take that year off because apparently all the kids from Seekonk played in Barrington, and I didn't know that for whatever reason. So I had that year off is when I started lifting weights very consistently. And then I played all throughout high school. But besides sports, I've always played guitar, and that's how I really got involved in this band, obviously. But when I was very young, my uncle and my father, they were in a guitar playing and singing duo. They wrote a few originals, but mostly covers. They called themselves Blue Sun, and they both have Blue Sun tattoos on them now, which is a cool thing. But they were done performing in bars and stuff by the time I was born, or maybe a little after I was born. But I've seen videos of them playing out in bars and stuff like that, and that always fascinated me. Just playing music for a crowd, you know what I mean? And just like at family events growing up, one of them always had a guitar in their hand. They were always singing a song, playing guitar on family vacations, birthday parties, whatever. And I picked up the guitar. My uncle bought my first guitar for me when I was 5 years old. And so I've been playing for 15 years now. And, I picked it up and put it back down. I never really had any too serious of lessons. I was in guitar club when I lived in Cranston, and I was just like a room full of, 20 4th graders with beginner instruments in their hands with one instructor, and he was teaching the whole class all at once. So I didn't learn all too much then. But other than that, I'm entirely self-taught. When I moved back to Seekonk, going into high school, when things weren't too easy with the situation with my father and my stepmother, I started playing guitar more consistently as kind of just like something to focus on. If something was going on I didn't want to be a part of, I didn't want to hear about it, whatever it was, I would just sit in my room, I would play guitar, for hours and hours. And back then I was just learning songs I was interested in. You know, I was really drawn to fingerstyle acoustic guitar because I like the intricacy of it and I thought it sounded pretty. So I started learning a lot of fingerstyle songs, and that's how I really started, you know, getting better and better at guitar. And then when COVID hit, or when lockdown first hit in March of 2020, that's when it started getting more serious because Zach, Elijah, Tyler, and I all met at the library in Seekonk when we couldn't be in each other's houses still, and we just played music together because all four of us played guitar. So we didn't have any thought of joining a band or anything, or starting a band rather. We would just get together for the sake of getting together with nothing better to do because we were locked in our houses. And eventually, you know, we started coming up with our own little melodies on guitar, and one thing led to another. We ended up in Zach's garage writing our own music, and here we are, a little over 2 years later now, or just about 3 years later, which is crazy to think about. And we have 2 studio projects released. We have plenty of, you know, live show experience. Downtown Providence, we've played art festivals. We threw our own, you know, backyard concert one time. So I never in a million years would have thought I would have played music live with a band because I was petrified of being on stage in front of people. But here we are, and here I am doing it, and I love it very much.
Yeah, so from an early age too, it sounds like that's where music was really introduced and it was allowed to like grow and develop. And having gone through kind of like I don't like to throw too much of the word traumatic experience in your household, like
Sure.
kind of dealing with that. I mean, it is a tough situation. Difficult situations, perfect word. Having music to be an outlet and using that to kind of be your place where it kind of takes you away and kind of you're able to focus on something and be creative. And I think
Right.
not enough people nowadays have a creative outlet. And that was something that I struggled with for a long time was before this podcast, I didn't really have a creative outlet. And that's what kind of made me question myself and made me think like, Jared, like, what do you have? Like,
Right.
what are you doing? Like,
Right.
and I've told the story many times about I moved away to Texas and Georgia, and that's where I kind of really found myself, and I kind of really found my voice, and kind of had to like really ask myself the hard questions of like, who are you and what are you doing?
Sure.
And when I asked myself like, what value do you bring to the world? And obviously, you bring value to your friends and your family, and like your job to a certain extent. Like obviously, those are basics, but I wasn't creating anything. I wasn't like inspiring or speaking what I feel and helping others. And like there was none of that. And when I kind of realized that, it made me feel like shit. Like I
Yeah.
was like, fuck, like I really don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
But that feeling of kind of like disgust with myself and like confusion made me dig enough to think maybe I could do a podcast. Let me look into this. Starting to look up stuff, look up equipment. Like, and I started going down the rabbit hole and I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do a podcast.
Yeah.
And now here I am. This is my 4th year of doing it. And it's
Congratulations, by the way.
thank you. And it's like, this is episode 129. Like I couldn't have imagined to ever hit this number. Like
Yeah.
I never thought I'd make it past 10 and I started before COVID.
Wow.
So that was a huge possible like detractor for me was
Sure.
like when I started in like October of 2019, I started recording episodes and then I released in November and I was like cranking away. Like I think I got to like episode like 17, maybe actually. Like COVID was just like kind of starting to happen and then I couldn't do episodes. Like I
Yeah.
can't get people to do like guest spots in
Yeah.
person. And that really made me kind of like nervous because like I was about to lose something I really loved.
Sure.
And then I found a way to kind of get creative. I did like a mini series with my cousins and like I was still making content.
Yeah,
and it
definitely.
goes down to the point of having that creative outlet for yourself to express yourself. And
Yeah.
music's a great way to do that.
Definitely.
Music really allows you to express yourself.
And it takes time and it takes energy. And I just wanted to touch upon, you said how like COVID has started to make it really difficult to make the podcast. And I find that really interesting because my band and I, we were born because of COVID. If COVID never happened, we would have never started playing music with each other and we wouldn't be in the band with the music created that we have today. And I find it interesting because playing shows with other bands all over the place, we've talked to a lot of people and it really seems like it was a make or break time for a lot of creative people. Like if you already had a band going or if you already had a podcast going, it became really, really difficult to sustain that during the difficulties that COVID caused for people like you and I who have something to create. And a lot of bands broke up because of, you know, the difficulties that came with COVID. I'm sure a lot of people who were doing podcasts like you are, you know, gave up because they couldn't get guests on, and they never came back to it. So the fact that you were able to, find something to keep creating content and push through that difficult time where you couldn't have somebody come down into your basement and just have a conversation with them, face to face, that's really important to that perseverance that you need to have to create art. Really, is what it is super important, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's that.
Yeah.
It's that whole aspect of creating something is
Yes.
so important, and it's the consistency. Like if in any aspect, I mean, music, podcasting, Twitch streaming, clothing brands, whatever you want to do in life, if you're not consistent at it, you will fail every single time.
Yep.
You don't have to be the best at it. You don't have to be the most creative. You don't have to be the most talented. But I know it's cliche, but hard work beats talent every single day.
Yes.
And like the fact that you guys are still creating music and you use COVID as a launching board for yourself is really inspiring, because like you said, it was a make or break time for a lot of people. And when I had to look at it, and my content was like, I just need to make something. I just need to do something. So luckily my bubble included my cousins, and I was able to get them on a podcast, and we talked to like Tiger King, and I think Brady was leaving the Patriots at the time.
Sure.
We're just talking nonsense, but it was to like keep me in the routine. And I think having a routine around your hobby and like your creative outlet is important, because with the routine, it keeps you fresh, it keeps you creative, it keeps you motivated. And like when you're not doing that, life kind of becomes stale. It becomes kind of boring. And I don't think enough people will force themselves in that situation.
Right. In the fall of 2020, I was living in Boston. I was going to UMass Boston, and a few buddies and I got ourselves an apartment that was just right off campus. And that was, something that presented itself as a difficulty for the band and I, because, they were all staying home. Elijah is a plumber full time. Zach and Tyler are both working full time. They're not going to school right now, but I was pursuing an education. So all three of them were home when I was up at school. Obviously, that created some difficulties. But, we made it work and we pushed through. Whenever I came home on weekends for whatever reason, we would always make the time to practice with each other. And then they would come up to the apartment sometimes. And if it was just, Zach and I on two acoustic guitars and Elijah trying to come up with some new lyrics, like we were always constantly trying to make forward progress with the band. And when I ended up moving home at the end of that semester, the things just took off. I think Elijah... I could be wrong, but I think Elijah showed us the first lyrics he ever wrote in my closet when we were practicing one time in my, my walk-in closet in my apartment that I had. Because, it goes to show that like it's that perseverance, making do with what you have in difficult situations, to make that forward progress in difficult times. And now, obviously we are where we are, and it's because of that perseverance through those difficult times that we were able to come out, 3 years later with all the music we have now and all the, it's not a crazy amount of success, but I consider it success compared to what we started with, all the success we have now. And it's due to that perseverance that we all have within ourselves and the effort we put towards the band.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely a huge part is like, you might not be successful in the financial aspect or the viewership aspect.
Sure.
And like, I feel the same way with the podcast, but like you are successful because you're creating something you enjoy. That's success in itself, because most people don't have a creative outlet. Most people don't create anything, to be quite frank with you.
Right.
Most people are not creators of things. And the fact that you are and you're able to do that is valuable, and it provides value. And that's something like, isn't it the coolest thing in the world where you can go on like Apple or Spotify and you could see your music's out there?
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. It's just anybody in the world, if they stumble upon it for whatever reason, they can just click a button on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, and they hear me playing guitar on a song. It's just, it's such a crazy thing to think about that, I never would have thought we would have been here. It's just surreal, really, to just, it's may not be, as meaningful to other people as it is to the people involved in the creation process. But, seeing the fruit of your efforts, accessible to the world is a great feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way about like if I look through even just like my Instagram and seeing all the clips that I have of people talking. I scroll through the YouTube, I scroll through the podcasts on Apple and Spotify, and like to be able to see like my stuff out there, like my name's on it, the podcast, and see all the different conversations that I've had. I wouldn't change that for the world.
It's cool. It's just a cool feeling to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, and you said something about success being measured in, like views or followers or something like that when we were talking about, you go on Instagram, you go online. Maybe the numbers aren't necessarily there. I was actually having I was kind of obsessed with that for a little while. When I was Elijah, Zach, and I are the three members of the band that really run the Instagram account, the Sue's Garage Instagram, and obviously promotion is important, and we use the Instagram to contact promoters and like merchandisers and things like that as an entity. You know what I mean? So when I was still one of the people managing the account, I would kind of like hyperfixate on the amount of followers we had. You know, at a certain point, oh, is it, you know, over 350 yet? Is it over 400 yet? And if like it went from, you know, like 398 to 396, I would like click it and like try to see if I could find, like, if I know, oh, that person unfollowed. Oh, I know they followed us and now they don't anymore. And I realized that's probably not the healthiest way to think about, you know, your success like that. And I realized that I was caring a lot about what other people thought of the music and what other people thought of like us as, you know, who we are doing the band and things like that. And that's why I kind of took a step back from managing the Instagram and from being on social media in general, is because, you know, I just want to make the music for me. I want to make the music with my friends that we are happy with in the end and give it to the world. And if nobody else likes it, at least we do. And if other people like it, then great. But it's just that I had to get rid of that, you know, that focus I had on what other people thought about it.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear someone's perspective on taking a step back from social media, because
Right.
so many people are very like integrated into social media. It's a huge part of their lives. And I'm like one of those people I was telling you, like, part of the thing that is like difficult with the podcast is I have to be integrating with social media, and
Right.
especially it's just me. Like I
Right.
have to be the one to promote it. I have to be the one on social media advocating for the podcast, because like it's not only my podcast I'm advocating for. I'm also advocating for every single person that comes on here and tells
Sure.
their story. And I take a lot of responsibility with that someone would sit across me, trust me with their story, be vulnerable with me, share parts of their lives that they might not have shared publicly before.
Sure.
So there's a certain level of like accountability and responsibility that I have to have
Yeah.
to present this in a positive way, to present this to as many people as I can to get the message out there, because I'm a firm believer that everyone has a story. I believe everyone's valuable, and I'm targeting meaningful connections. And I think when you authentically do that, it provides kind of like this positive wave.
Definitely.
And it's like the butterfly effect. You
Yeah.
affect one person, that person can go affect another person, and it just keeps going.
Right.
So I look at it as that. Like, yeah, cool. I might get so many views or so many listens or so many likes on a post or so many followers. But like in the grand scheme, and I had to like take that step back for myself. Remember the first
Sure.
year that I created the podcast and the Instagram, it's like, I'm gonna get 1,000 followers on the page. How naive I was.
Yeah,
Like I
right.
did not realize like how difficult it was to run a social media platform.
Yeah, definitely.
So I commend you for being willing and able to kind of recognize that in yourself, that you were becoming fixated on the number,
Yeah.
and like, all right, this is not helping me in a positive way, that I can take like a step back from
Yeah.
this and allow kind of like your band members to
Yep.
take that control.
And I'm lucky enough to have band members that are willing to take that control, like Zach and Elijah. And in, you know, today's day and age, social media presence is everything. You know, if one of our songs became a TikTok sound, it could blow up to millions of streams overnight. And, you know, we would have to put ourselves, you know, in the limelight to be able to say like, hey, here's our song, make it the sound in order for it to become a sound in the first place. And that's something that Zach has been really pushing for recently, actually. He wants us to start making like kind of those like cheesy band TikToks or like Instagram posts, like, you know, like guess who our bassist is, and like we all play the bass and, you know, things like that. Kind of just like band content. Whereas I've kind of taken a different opinion as to things like that, because I feel like I don't want, you know, my success as a musician to be determined by what, you know, all these people on TikTok see this 5-second clip of us, and now they have their opinion, and now they like the music. I want them to find the music organically and be able to say, hey, these guys are really good, you know what I mean? So it's just that a little discrepancy we have in viewpoint, because he feels that those types of posts is something that we should be working towards. But I've actually taken a step back of also social media. I have Snapchat because it's one of my primary means of communication with friends and things like that. But, you know, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, the account still exists, sure, but I deleted the apps. And not only because I was like focusing on how many followers the band had or anything, but also because I just found myself wasting hours every day on these apps where, I consider myself an ambitious person, there's better ways for me to be spending my time, not, scrolling through these 10-second videos to give my brain the little bit of dopamine it wants when I'm bored in my room. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's all dopamine. I mean,
Yeah.
people who don't say, or at least don't admit that they're addicted to social media are lying to themselves,
Yeah.
or when they post that it's for themselves.
Sure.
Like, it's not for yourself. Like, if it was for yourself, you would have kept it for yourself. Like, it's just a lie. Like, if I make a post, I'm looking for some sort of attention or validation in some aspect. That's
Yep.
what social media is. Like, it's hard for people to accept because, like, it is kind of dirty. People don't like that aspect of it, but it's the truth. And, like, obviously part of it can be for yourself where, yeah, I look good and, like, you want to share that, but it's the sharing aspect where it becomes the attention part.
Right.
And if you can acknowledge that and accept that, and that's something that I do, is like, yeah, when I get professional photos done, like I do it partially for myself, partially for the podcast. And when I post it, yeah, I'm looking for some form of validation that they're good photos.
Sure.
Like, I want people to say that I look good in this photo.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. People want to, like, stigmatize that and make it negative, or like attention seeking is like a bad thing. But when I think it's just something that we all naturally do. We all want to fit in with the group.
Right.
And I think that's been since, like, human history. Like, because if you get isolated from the group,
Yeah.
you don't survive.
Right.
So I think it's not a negative thing. It's just people have turned it into that. And social media has, like, amped that feeling up, like, times like 1,000. So people look at it differently.
Yeah.
But I think being able to, like, step away and, like, knowing when is enough, and, like, when you want to be a creative person and you're using social media so much, it takes away from that.
Right.
So, like, I commend you for being willing to, like, hey, I want to put more time into, like, my life,
Right.
and not on social media, into other people's lives.
Right. Josh said it best when I was listening to his podcast that he did last week. He said that, like, just because somebody likes a picture or a post or something doesn't mean they like you. And that's just something that a lot of people, they don't really recognize when they're using social media as adamantly as everybody does nowadays. They think, oh, my post got 400 likes. That means 400 people, like, I have 400 friends. No, that doesn't mean that. That means 400 people saw your post and hit the little heart next to it and kept scrolling. And that's another thing that I had to kind of recognize about the music when I was still managing the band account, was that we would post, hey, we just released this new EP, go check it out. If that post got 100 likes, that doesn't mean 100 people like the music. That means 100 people recognized they released new music. It doesn't mean 100 people listened to it. They just saw, they made this post, like, keep scrolling. And kind of separating myself from, expecting people, or, like, putting value in the amount of likes on a post have, I focused more towards, people reaching out to us and saying, hey, you guys are really good. I like what you're doing a lot. You guys should keep it up. Because that did happen. A few people, that we went to high school with that I would have never expected to even check out the music when it came out, would contact us all separately and say, you guys are really cool. I really like your music. You should keep going. That's the type of stuff that, like, really motivates me as a musician. That, like, there's people that are out there that, like, really like what I've been creating. I want to keep creating music for more people to like it, and for the people who already like it to have more music to listen to. And it's just that you need to separate that feeling you get from, somebody reaching out to you and saying, hey, you're really good, from the amount of likes you get on a post. Because if you start caring about the amount of likes you get on a post, it kind of dilutes that, actual genuine somebody reaching out to say you're doing really good right now, because that focus, even if it's, minor, that you have on the amount of likes a post is getting, is drawing away from the appreciation that you can have for somebody genuinely reaching out and saying, hey, you're doing really good right now.
Yeah, 100%. People don't reach out enough, to be honest, in my opinion. And I'm a big person of giving flowers when flowers are due, and doing it while you're talking to someone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when I first listened to you guys' music, like, I really did enjoy it. And I'm not saying that even, like, in a corny ass way, or just because you're on the podcast.
Thank you.
Because obviously you hear people that when they're starting out, sometimes they're not that good, and, like, they're learning. But, like, when I listen to you guys, it's just kind of, like, gave me kind of Beastie Boy vibes, and, like, Beatles vibes. And it was just, like, really dope. Like, I just, like, liked the vibe of the music.
Sure.
And, like, the instrument sounded great. The vocal sounded great. Like, I liked the lyrics. Like, you could hear everything clearly. It wasn't, like, too, like, the instruments weren't too loud versus the vocal.
Yeah.
Like, it was, like, really mixed really well. Like,
Shout out Randy at Newcastle Sound.
Shout out. And it's maybe I'm just a content creator, so I look at that stuff and I pay attention more maybe than the average person. But like, you guys do deserve flowers. I'm always like,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
trying to give flowers to people when you're talking to them, because
Yeah.
not enough people, like you said, will reach out. They'll just like the post and move on.
Right.
And like, I try to be intentional with my likes, where I like anyone who's been on the podcast or been associated with the podcast or likes the podcast and has told me, I try to show love to their posts regardless of what they post.
Sure.
Like, they could post something about fucking flowers for all I care, but I'm still gonna like the post because I care about that person, and
Right.
I'm big on being loyal and showing to support people who show love and just like support back. So it even ties into our other points of just being intentional with social media.
Yep.
And I try to be like, pay attention to your algorithm, pay attention to what you watch. If you're going to be on social media, at least you should be paying attention to the things that you're seeing on your page.
Right.
Because if you're not, you're going to be watching a bunch of fucking nonsense, and like, it just can be, especially with TikTok, it can really drain you in and suck you in. And
Yeah.
like,
It's bad for you.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
good for you. And it goes into that point of the dopamine thing,
Yep.
where we're receiving so much dopamine nowadays from social media that when you probably noticed it when you removed yourself, you probably felt like an itch to like open your phone and go on an app.
All the time, yeah. When I lived in Boston, TikTok, that was the last time I had TikTok. It was, I would spend probably an hour and a half, 2 hours a day just scrolling away. I realized it was an issue. I got rid of it. And then eventually my brain found its way to Instagram Reels. And then I was on Instagram Reels scrolling the same way I was on TikTok. And that's when I was like, man, I really got to get rid of Instagram now too, because my brain's just going to keep coming back for more. And then it became Facebook, because Facebook has Reels. And I would go on Facebook and find it. It was just that little click of dopamine that my brain wanted so bad, it would just find any way to get it. So I was like, all right, you're not getting any more. So I deleted all the apps. So there's no way that I can, fall into that trap. Because, there's an old saying, I don't know who said it, but it goes, the comfort zone is where dreams go to die. Is that when you start becoming comfortable in where you are in life is when like you stop feeling ambitious towards, big ideas that you once had. And I was spending so much time just scrolling away, that like I wasn't making any progress towards. I could have been practicing guitar. I plan on going to real estate school starting next month. I already have like a flipping houses for dummies book and a different book on real estate that my family had gotten me. I could have been studying those books. There's other much better uses. Even strengthening relationships with my loved ones. There's just plenty a person can do that isn't sitting on your couch scrolling on your phone for a couple hours every day. And even if it's 2 hours a day, that's 14 hours a week. And then, it just compiles in the snowball effect. And, by the end of the year, you're hundreds, if not thousands of hours deep in time that you spent on social media that you could have been spending, bettering yourself as a person.
Absolutely. And if I would advise people to look at their screen time. Pay attention to that. Like, mine's disgusting. I'm not even going to lie to you guys. Like, I'm a avid social media user, partially for the podcast, partially for self-enjoyment.
Sure.
Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I don't use it and scroll TikTok and like all the random trends and videos and shit like that. But you have to be aware of like what you're digesting in terms of like what you're watching, what you're listening to, what you're scrolling on social media. And I give you a lot of credit for, just like I said, pulling back from that, because I don't think a lot of people would do it.
Yeah.
And like, it takes strength. I kind of want to ask you, do you feel like you're missing out on anything?
At first I did, but now not so much, just because it's been some time since I've gotten off of it. At first, like, I want to see, like what the Sue's Garage Band page is posting, because I have no idea what those posts looks like recently. I want to see, what my friends have been up to. I want to see, my girlfriend posts pictures of me and her for her birthday. Like, my brain is like, oh, what picture did she post? You know what I mean? But none of that stuff matters. And the longer you're disconnected from the whole social media trap, the more you realize that none of it matters. So like now, understanding that I have that thought, like, oh, what picture did she post? I know that it doesn't matter, so it doesn't like bother me at all. It's just something that popped into my mind for a second. But at first it was definitely more difficult than it is now. I'd say the biggest difficulty I've had from separating from social media has been having to do with the band, just because, like I said, a lot of our promotion and merchandising and things like that were through, the DMs on the band page and things like that. And I liked being involved in the business side of the band. That was, kind of my forte. I was the one handling, all the money for the most part, coming from gigs, we have a little purse we keep all the cash in, but we also do have, a bank account open in Zach and I's name specifically for the band in case we ever need to cut a check. And I was the one that was most involved in paying for merchandise when it was time to pay from the band accounts to buy new T-shirts or to buy album covers or to buy new stickers and all that stuff. And I liked feeling like I was, managing the business that I was a part of. But now my hands are kind of off of that, and I've kind of taken that step back. And obviously, I could just set up the email for Sue's Garage to be more present in the space of communicating with promoters and merchandisers and things like that. But DMs on social media is really the easiest means of communication that we have as, business to business communication nowadays. So
it's how we set this up originally.
Exactly,
and then
right.
I realized, I'm like, oh, he's not, I had to hit up Zach. He's like, yeah, he's not on social media. I was
I'm
like,
sorry
fuck.
for that. Yeah. For those listening, we agreed to do the podcast on social media, on Instagram DMs. And then before we had, a date absolutely solidified and everything was when I took that step back. So then Jared starts hitting me up saying, hey, when are we setting this up? Hey, when are we setting this up? And you must have thought I ghosted you. You must have thought that I didn't want to do it anymore.
I was like, fuck.
Man, no, I'm happy to be here, definitely. And I'm sorry that I didn't even think about that. It was kind of just like an impulse decision, just like, all right, I'm done. Like, I found myself on it scrolling, and I was like, I don't want to do this, delete the app, didn't think twice about it.
I'm persistent, so I found a way to find you.
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate you reaching out to Zach like that, because it really did just slip my mind. But I find that those difficult decisions to make, like deleting Instagram, are easiest when they're, like a snap decision, because you have that moment of clarity where you're like, I don't want to be doing what I'm doing. But if you keep, the means to go back to doing whatever it is you don't want to be doing available, then, you'll probably find your way to doing it again. And, when I was in high school, I had vaped from time to time, as most high schoolers do. And, whenever I decided to quit, whenever that was, I made that snap decision, like, I don't want to do this anymore. I probably didn't even finish whatever I had, just threw it away. And it was just, because you need to make, when you have that feeling of this is something I don't want to be doing, if I stopped doing this, I would be bettering myself as a person. That's when it's the easiest, because if you procrastinate making that decision, it becomes harder and harder to make.
Yeah, I think it's kind of regressive behavior when you keep going back, and that goes into anything, relationships, friendships,
Yep.
like jobs, like constantly like flirting with other things or doing other things. Like, you can't keep going back to the past. Like, you have to be forward thinking, especially if you remove yourself from social media, to go back just to check on stuff. When you made a great point, it doesn't matter. Like, if you think about just, I know it's kind of morbid, but being on your deathbed, you're not gonna be thinking about, oh, what did my like girl post on Instagram of us like
Right,
the other day?
exactly.
Like, it's like no one cares realistically, and that's a huge point to even make about social media when you're entering a creative space. If you want to, because like when you're first starting, luckily you have other bandmates to help you with the social media, which makes it easier for you to be a part, like less a part of the social
Yeah.
media part. But when you are creating something, social media plays a big factor in that. And
Especially nowadays.
yeah, I mean, like you said, it's your presence online becomes. I always say it's your resume.
Yeah,
like, I always say it's like
That's a good way to put
people
it.
look at it and they make their assessments. So you kind of have to pick and choose what you want to post. And like people like kind of like dog me for that. I'm like, I've definitely archived photos and made my Instagram look a certain way and have
Yeah.
a certain aesthetic to it.
Who
and
hasn't? You know what I mean?
yeah, and it's for that purpose, because I'm one of those people that I believe it's a resume. Like, when people look at my Instagram, I want them to be like, okay, I want to be a part of this podcast.
Mhm.
This is something that I want to be like. I want to share my message on this story. So like, I also have to entice guests too, and be able to like point to my Instagram as my body of work.
Yeah.
Be like, this is what I've accomplished. This is what I do. Check it out if you want to be a part of it, type thing.
Right. And you say resume metaphorically, but even literally, like, it can affect, your jobs that you're looking for in your future and things like that. You hear all too many stories nowadays of, somebody applying for a job that, they're hopeful for, and then being rejected because of something they said on Twitter, 4 years prior, or something they posted on Instagram that didn't resonate with the company's morality for whatever reason. And, it's easier to just step away from the space than to be involved in it altogether.
Yeah, I mean, digital footprint's real.
Right. Oh,
Like,
yeah, definitely.
I don't think enough people, especially young people, don't truly realize that. Like, when I was growing up, I was able to grow up with social media. So like, we had AIM. I was like just right kind of with MySpace. Like,
Sure.
I never really, like, I had one, but I wasn't really allowed to have one.
Sure.
But like, I was able to watch the progression of these apps. And I feel for these younger kids who are really coming up now, like especially going through middle school and going through high school with the TikToks, with the Snapchats, with Instagram, where these apps really dictate like your social presence within the school and outside of school and with your friends. And I really feel for them because it is difficult. You do compare naturally. I mean,
Right.
even outside of social media, when you're looking, say you're in the gym,
Yep.
you're gonna compare yourself to other people. It's just natural. We do that as like a risk assessment too, as human
Right.
beings to say, oh, is this person a threat? Is this person not a threat? Like we're always comparing ourselves. And once you kind of like, you got to be really, we've been talking a lot about social awareness and like self awareness on the podcast, but it's so important because if you can't analyze what's going around with other people and within yourself, you're not going to be successful in life, period, no
Right.
matter what you do. And you have to be willing to define success for yourself. If success is finance, great. Is success viewership?
Yep.
Great. Is success putting out 10 albums? Great. Whatever it is, like, you have to define what success is for you because it's different for every person.
Yep.
Like chasing fame and chasing being super rich, I mean, is great and all,
Yeah,
but you have to find value within the life that you're living
yeah,
and what
you
you're
need to make
doing.
yourself happy. And you, like you were saying, you define it for yourself. If my father, if he was to ever give me just a single lesson, it would always be, do not care what other people think about you. You are living your own life. It does not matter what anybody else has to say. And he lives the lifestyle where he does not care what other people think about him. So, there's definitely lessons to be learned about like how to go about your life and how not to go about your life from somebody like him. But definitely having that understanding of I'm living my life for me has helped me make a lot of difficult decisions in my life. One being primarily not pursuing a bachelor's degree. I went to UMass Boston for a semester, and I was able to pay for it. I have some college savings from my father's parents. Thank you very much to Grandma Bonnie and Papa, if you're listening. And I was able to, with their help, mostly put myself through one semester at UMass while living in an off-campus apartment in Boston, which was extremely expensive. But then I decided while I was there, I don't feel right here. And school was online, sure, maybe I would have felt different if it was actual in-person classes for when we were moving there. But, I just didn't feel right. I felt like I'm not positive about what I'm doing. I feel like I'm spending far too much money for this investment to be worth it right now. I don't want to take on any debt, and obviously that's inevitable if you are pursuing a bachelor's degree unless you have a crazy amount of savings. So I made the decision after that one semester. I moved back into my house and I got my associate's degree from BCC instead of finishing out my 4-year degree at UMass. And I made the decision to not return to a 4-year school. Starting next month, I will be taking real estate courses. And real estate's always, a field that I've been very interested in. My mother and father owned 10 units in Pawtucket and East Providence when I was first born. And so I grew up around, them fixing up houses and having tenants and things like that. And that's always been something that I've been very interested in. And so I wanted to pursue, I've always wanted to pursue real estate anyway. I decided to make it my priority because I did out the math, and if I wanted to return to UMass, I would have ended up somewhere between like $50,000 and $60,000 in debt after all my savings was said and done. And I know that's not that much money, for some people. Some people go to school and end up with a couple $100,000 in debt. Some people go to school and end up with no debt. But that's like where I was personally, and I just didn't feel comfortable with that number. So I made the decision for myself to not take out those loans and to instead invest my money and my time into pursuing a career in real estate. That decision did not resonate well with a lot of the people in my life. Most primarily, the one that comes to mind right away is my grandfather, who I had said before is literally my best friend on the planet. He's, through all the difficulties I've had in my life, he's held my hand all the way through it. Even up until recently, I just bought my first car. That's, I put money down and now I'm financing the rest of it. So I have a loan to pay off with a credit union. He helped me get my insurance all set. He helped me get the sale finalized. He helped me get the loan finalized. He's just somebody that is guiding me through life in the right direction and always has. And he was somebody who was very, very outspoken about wanting me to go back to school and get a 4-year degree. And, my whole family knows that for me to do something against my grandfather's recommendation is unheard of. So I kind of just had to, look myself in the mirror and, regardless of what these serious role models in my life were saying, to know within myself, this isn't what's right. I need to, pursue the path that I feel in my heart is what's best for me at this time, and that is pursuing a career in real estate. And obviously, maybe it's safer to get a business management degree from, a good school, and then you start making $60,000 a year right out of college, but something just didn't feel right. And, I just had to follow my gut and go with my gut and make it known to everybody that, like, I know that you don't agree with what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it. And it wasn't an easy thing, but, you got to do what you got to do to make yourself happy. And that all circles back to what my dad said, you got to live your life. You have to make sure that your priorities are first, and you're not making your decisions, especially serious life-changing decisions, based on what other people want for you or expect of you.
Yeah, kudos to you for being willing to like make that decision, because that is a big decision to make at a young age. And it's always difficult that so many people struggle with that decision, especially nowadays, between is college really worth it kind of question that circulates, especially online nowadays. But I mean, it is something that you have to do, is take control of your own life. Like, no one's going to do it for you. No one's going to like take you by the hand and show you how to do this. No one's going to show you how to make the music. No one's going to show you to get an Apple. No one's going to show you how to get book gigs and all this other stuff. Like, no one's going to show me how to do a podcast. No one's going to post my podcast. I have to do it. You
just got to figure it out.
And there it is. You have to just figure it out. And it sucks. That's a shitty advice, but like, it's the truth. Like, people can help you and give you pieces here and there and take what you need, leave what you don't. But the end of the day, it always comes back to you and what you're willing to put into whatever you're doing.
Right.
And I think once people accept that mindset and like start figuring out, you really got to ask at the end of the day, like, you just got to ask yourself, what do you like doing?
Yep.
And you got to figure it out. Like, some people, they figure it out when they're young. Some people figure out middle of the, like, early 20s, 30s. Some people don't figure out until their 50s and 60s. Like, you kind of have to just vibe with it. And it's shitty advice, but like, it's the truth. Like, I didn't create a podcast that I was super passionate about until like early to like mid to now I'm getting to my late 20s. And I couldn't imagine myself doing anything else other than this now. So it's definitely, like kind of going through that.
Real estate is really something that I do feel passionate about and interested in. And, like I said, I did not feel comfortable pursuing a business degree because there was just too much of like, I don't feel like I belong here. I don't feel like I'm doing the right thing for my life right now. But real estate is always something I was interested in. There's a process called wholesaling real estate. I don't know if you're familiar.
No.
So essentially what it is say that there's a broken down house that's in not the best shape for $100,000, just for the sake of the conversation. If I can get that house under contract with a backdoor in case, it falls through for whatever reason, if I can get that house under contract and then sell it to a flipping company for $120,000 before that contract expires and I have to back out of the deal because I don't have the $100,000 to pay for it, they cut me a check for $20,000 and I just middleman the transaction between seller and flipping company, because, flipping companies aren't always going out of their way looking for these rundown houses to buy. I'm sure that there's busy companies, and these house sellers are always looking for middlemen to, be the deal maker for these companies that would come and fix up a house like that. And even when I was in UMass Boston, I knew I didn't have, it's easier when you have a license, obviously, which is part of the reason I'm pursuing a license. But I would practice. I would go on, Zillow and real estate websites like that and find, beaten down, not in the best shape properties, and I would give the owner a call. And I would say, I would practice just, and I knew I couldn't get it under contract, and I knew that there was no way that it was going to work out for me connecting him with a company, but I would just try to talk to him about it. I would say, I'm a middleman. What I do is I get the house under contract for 30 days, and in those 30 days, I try to, connect you at a profit or a loss, which always for a profit, with a company that would develop your home. And, it's not in your hands anymore. And I for a few times, I would get people into a position where they would be interested in moving forward with me. So I was kind of proving to myself, like, all right, I can do this. This is a process where I, might have some natural talent towards. And I, once I get my license and I understand the more legal ins and outs of buying and selling real estate, this is something that I could potentially make a lot of money doing. And I had fun doing it. Like, I had no reason to sit in my apartment in Boston and call property owners to try to, pretend to broker a deal to get him connected with a flipping agency. But I was doing it because it was something I felt passionate about. And, it was that feeling that I had, wanting to practice, wanting to get better at this, this talent that kind of I proved to myself that, this is what I want to be doing. And having that feeling inside of me definitely helped me finalize the decision when I decided to tell my whole family, this is what I'm going to be doing. You can't tell me otherwise.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought this up too, to kind of, because we are getting towards the end of this podcast,
Sure.
and I do want to start doing the wrap up stuff as well. But I'm glad you brought up talking about real estate, because it also separates from the band stuff to show that you can have your passion and have a career as
Right.
well too. And like, obviously, if the band takes off, you're like gonna go with the band's
Yeah,
probably
of
stuff.
course.
I'm assuming, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Playing
it's
guitar's
like
a fun thing, man.
you gotta have, and I always say to people, like, understand that you got to be, sometimes you're a little bit realistic with
Yeah.
life, and you gotta find the joy with the life that you're living. Like we talked about, like if you find passion in real estate, go with that
Yep.
and do that while also doing the band stuff. And I think that's always gonna
Definitely.
benefit in the long run. But
Zach and Tyler right now, they are very, gung ho into the music. And even if Sue's Garage doesn't work out, they both want careers, somewhere in music, because they're just super, super passionate about it. And I respect that about them to death, because, that's a very brave thing to do. And, it's their true passion. I'm sure that they're both going to be very successful wherever they end up. But the way that I look at it, I'm still as committed to the band as they are, but I view it as my plan A minus. Because my plan A is, becoming a successful, somewhere in real estate, whether it's an appraiser, a broker, if I have my own company, wholesaling, whatever it turns out to be, that's plan A. To have a family and, have a job and make the money and, have the life that I want to have would be fantastic. But like, I don't expect the music to hit the streaming platforms and take off on the charts. But if it ever does, then, that'd be great. But that's why it's, A minus, because I care about it, like, as much as they do, but I have other priorities that I'm also, focusing on simultaneously.
yeah, and I'm glad that I had you on to talk about these things.
Definitely,
Stuff
yeah.
that I don't know about too. So it's great to like hear that. It's real conversations with real people. That's always been the mantra of the podcast.
Right.
So, David, we are getting to the end of the podcast. So I do have one more question for you. And that question is, what would your advice be to someone who wants to pursue their passion?
To somebody who wants to pursue their passion, I would tell you to take that first step, because it's the hardest step to take. Because once you have the ball rolling, it's just, one thing follows another. And as long as you keep with it and you work hard and you truly are passionate about it, good things come to those who wait. Eventually your time will come. You can't care what the people around you are saying, no matter how important they are to you. If it's, your biggest role model, or if it's somebody who, has something negative to say about what you're doing at the moment, whether it's something creative, whether it's changing a job path, it doesn't matter. You just need to stay true to what you feel inside is right for you, and find the courage to, no matter who it disappoints, because it might disappoint some people you care about, is to take that first step.
Perfect. Love that. I think that's really great advice, especially for people who are afraid to take that first step. That first step is everything.
Yeah.
Once you take that first step, it all becomes a lot easier, guys. I promise. I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Of course, man, it
This
was
has
a
been a
blast.
fucking blast. Just like getting to know you, because it's our first time meeting in person and stuff, obviously.
definitely.
So this has been great. Check out their music as well. I'll be tagging them in everything that I post on social media. But again, thank you for coming on the podcast.
It'll be Sue's Garage on Spotify and Apple Music. We just released a new 6-song EP entitled The Swing of Things was the first one. The new one's called Everyday Chaos. Check it out where you listen to music.
Perfect. And when you guys get ready to try to drop some new music, hit me up and we could try to set up a little podcast and promote it some more.
Definitely, man. Sounds
we'll do
good.
that. For you guys, if you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, share it with your family, share it with your grandma. If you like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search the Carroll Connection, or Jared M. Carroll should pop up right for you. And if you want to be a guest in the podcast, you can hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at the Carroll Connection, and we could set that right up. So, till next time, guys, peace.